Okay, I am Cynthia Clayton. I am one of the consultants at the Utah Parent Center. I will be facilitating this last session and welcome to our last session of our Family Links Conference. We at the Parent Center want to thank you all for joining us for this exciting and very informative conference. I have learned so much and it has just been fantastic. Tonight, we are joined by Detective Jeremy Dean of the West Valley Police Department. Individuals with disabilities and mental health needs often come into contact with the justice system without knowing what to expect from the system. Tonight, we will learn about the way the system functions and efforts made throughout different points of the interactions with the system to understand those needs stemming from either a developmental disability or mental health issues. Um, Detective Dean, I will give you a 10-minute warning when you have 10 minutes left, and then the last 10
Perfect.
minutes will be spent wrapping up, answering any additional questions, and announcing our prize winners. We'll also be launching our polls, so please, parents, when you see that pop up on your screen, please fill that out. And let's turn the time over to our guest, and please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I am Detective Dean. I am currently assigned to West Valley's CIT program. I'm the detective over our CIT program. Our CIT program, I'm sure you guys have already covered what CIT is, but in case you haven't, it is crisis intervention. So I basically take care of any cases involving mental health or developmental disabilities. So that is where I am. I have been a police officer for about 14 years now. I think I'm actually going on 15. I have been in the CIT program for about 4 of those years. Prior to that, I worked for the federal government and got tired of that. So I came to a local position here at West Valley City and did a year of patrol before coming into the program. We actually have, and I'll discuss our program a little bit later on in my presentation. But yeah, so real quick, typically when police officers are summoned into a situation involving a child with a mental health issue or developmental disability, there's a couple of different areas where we're called into. Occasionally we will get a call from a school or some other facility regarding a child, but mostly those situations are involving like runaway kids. So it's not really dealing with any kind of behavioral issues or anything like that. It's mostly just a kid may have wandered away from school and it becomes a process of locating that child. For the most part, when it comes to kids with mental health issues or developmental disabilities, when police are summoned, it's usually in the home setting. And that home setting is usually because of caregiver fatigue. I don't know if that's been covered in the conference, but it's something that we strive as police officers to recognize in the home. And it's one of the things that we look for when we're summoned to a situation. Caregiver fatigue is basically where a parent or guardian has just reached their limit. They have either had a bad day and they just can't handle what's going on at the current moment, but that's usually when a police officer is summoned. We usually go into these kind of situations. We try to go into them very cautiously because of the training that we receive in our crisis intervention group. But one of the things that we do is we try to observe and find what we can do as police officers, as detectives. We actually have a social worker that will respond on calls with us. And we go in and we try to identify hooks, triggers, resources that can be provided, anything that we can do to help out that family. So real quick, I wanted to break down our program for everybody. This is not a statewide program by any means. We are a part of a group called CIT Metro. And it basically takes several different police departments and we coordinate our efforts together to have a better product in the end. There is a lot of other CIT programs, a lot of different departments have their own, but we kind of built this group together. It consists of West Valley, Salt Lake City, Sandy, Unified, Utah County, South Salt Lake, Orem, Provo, UTA, and there's a couple other ones there too. Those are the ones that we basically started the program with. Our program is, however, probably the most in-depth program, but that's more of because of our command staff made it a priority for us. So our chief has actually mandated that each of our officers go through CIT training. And that's different from what they get in post. So I did mention that I teach in post. Most officers in post going through their basic training course get about 8 hours of training in mental health and disabilities and basically scenarios. So it's not a whole lot of time that police officers get in training.
Is this, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you with, we do have a question. Is this part of the
Okay.
Safe Utah?
Sorry, what was that?
Is this part of Safe Utah?
So we coordinate with Safe UT is a part of the Uni program. They are run by Uni, but we coordinate a lot with Uni. We actually, when we put on different academies and stuff, we coordinate with them and we have a lot of presenters come down from Uni to help us. And I'll talk a little bit about them as well later on about some of the different resources that are available to parents. So.
And I do have another one that just popped up. So
Perfect.
Marita says, how do I protect my son since he does not have an etiquette on his forehead that says, I have a disability?
That's a great question. So the hard thing is when a police officer is dispatched, you don't know what you're going to get and that officer doesn't know what he's getting into. Our program has different ways that we have set up to help our officers succeed in these situations. Each department is different, but one of the things that we've established is called a special needs safety program. And I know we're doing it. Salt Lake is looking at implementing this program, and so is, I want to say Orem is doing it right now too. Basically what we do is we contact parents that we've had interactions with, either parents that have autistic children or parents that have some sort of something that we can help out with. And what we'll do is we will gather as much information about their child, what their hooks, what their triggers are. We'll gather as much information as like favorite places they like to go, what works the best for that child. So when we have an interaction with those parents' children, we have a head start with already knowing what will be the best outcome for that child. So a little bit more about our program as well. So we have different, I mean, this was originally geared towards when we first got into CIT. The reason why we got into CIT was actually we were unhappy with the way veterans were being trained or being treated by police officers. That was our first thing. This has been a learning thing, and we have been developing this program since then. But what we try to do is we try to find the best solutions working with the public and trying to find these opportunities to help out. So we find that we deal with probably the highest group that we deal with is the autistic children when it comes to law enforcement. And that's mostly just because of the caregiver fatigue. We'll see it occasionally with high functioning autistic children, uh, especially if there's medication changes and stuff like that. But a lot of the time we deal with like the low functioning autistic. So we want to find out as much information because we know that sometimes when these kids disappear, there's a bad outcome, especially with drowning and stuff like that. So that's why we do this special needs safety program, is so that if we do have a call where a child is missing and we know that that child is autistic, we know that that child is low functioning on autistic, but we know where that child usually likes to frequent, we know where that child likes to go, we can immediately send officers there to make sure that child is safe. We actually have an autistic child here in the city who likes to, his favorite thing is lights. And he likes to go to a nearby car dealership and he'll lay down in the middle of the car dealership at night to look up at the lights in the car dealership. And it's just something that we're able to look at because later on, if his parents call because he's missing, we can send officers straight there and we don't have to spend hours looking around the city trying to find a child that we know where he's at. So, and then the same principle goes for like water and parks and different things like where the children like to go. So our program is actually broken down into 3 levels. So our first basic level is what every officer is trained at. We train all of our officers in a 40-hour academy in CIT. Now this 40 hours, I can't tell you the exact amount of time we deal with children with disabilities, but we cover every single mental health issue. We cover learning disabilities, and we do focus a lot on autism. The nice thing about that is that it gives our officers that chance to learn about these different situations. And our goal is to provide the officers with that second where they will think about what might be going on besides something criminal. That is our goal, is so that if we can stop the officer for just a couple of seconds to reconsider that maybe they're being summoned to something that is not criminal in nature. Because the hard thing is, as police officers, we deal with criminals. We deal with bad people a lot of the time. And so we want to get our officers in the mindset that not everything that we're summoned to is going to be a bad person. So if we can get them to recognize the fact that maybe this isn't just a kid that's being bad, that this kid might have a learning disability, it causes the officer to stop and think and process the situation better. So that is our first level of training, is that tier 1, as we like to call it. And that is something that our chief is, she's put out that every single officer in West Valley gets. A lot of other agencies are trying to do that as well. I know Salt Lake City wants all their officers trained in that. And the hard thing is we're trying to catch up at this point. We have almost 300 officers. We run 4 academies every year, and these are week-long academies, so there's a lot of prep. We also do a lot of stuff at post, so there's a lot of prep that goes into this. The problem is with COVID and everything else, we haven't been able to even have any this last year. We're going to have another academy this next week, but again, we have to keep our numbers a little bit low. So we're going to have about 30 officers, and that's from all the different agencies. So in the reality, we have about 8 officers going through a training, and we're just trying to catch up, sort of thing.
I've got a couple of questions. I know you're moving on to part 3, but so we don't get behind. How can we as parents and self-advocates in the community help improve this program or get this program statewide?
As far as statewide, that is going to have to come down to legislation. But as far as in the community, parents have a lot of influence in the community. You can reach out to, and this was something that I wanted to talk about at the end, but I think it's a great opportunity to talk about it now. As parents of children with disabilities or mental health issues, you have the opportunity, you can go to your police department and sit down with your police department and ask where their CIT program is. You have the right to go and find out what's going on. And we are actually planning on going down to Iron County this year to establish this program down there for them. And if your police department does not have a CIT program, you can advocate that they start their own CIT program.
Okay, thank you. And the next question we have, if a police officer goes to a foster home or a proctor home, would they automatically think that the child has a disability or mental health?
No. Well, okay. I cannot take out the human factor of this. I can't speak for every police officer. I am sure that there is a portion who will go into that situation and just immediately assume that this child has RAD or that this has opposition defiance disorder, some kind of condition such as those. We teach our officers that that is not the case. We push for our officers that if you have met one child, you have met that one child. Not every child is the same. So we push for our officers in our department to do their job and to investigate the situation. And we talk to them about how they're able to do that. We look for cues that the child might have. We all know that a lot of autistic kids have different, like they won't look you in the eye and different things. We teach them what to look for. And then we also talk to them about the fact that their parents are there. And their parents are probably the biggest resource that you will have in that situation. If it's a violent situation, the officers are instructed that they need to control the situation. So, if that means moving the child out of the situation so you can start working on de-escalation, we do encourage our officers that, if we need to control the situation, we got to control the situation. And then let's work on figuring out what's going on. Let's de-escalate the situation and let's find a solution. But I can't say that, you're not going to get, as far as you might get that officer that assumes that, unfortunately. That's just the human factor of life. I can't control them, but one thing that you can do is if your department does have a CIT program and that is an issue, one of the things that you can do is you can actually call dispatch. When you contact dispatch, and we push this a lot, we tell people to request a CIT officer. Our CIT officers not only get the 8 hours at post, they get 40 hours with us, and then they get another 40 hours with us to become a road CIT certified officer.
And can you give us maybe a telephone number? Because I do have a parent asking, how do they get a hold of a police officer or call the CIT dispatch?
So yes, I can get you a phone number. That's going to depend on where you're at. I don't know, is this mostly just Salt Lake County or is this more of a statewide program?
The Utah Parent Center is statewide. I'm not certain. I
Statewide.
would dare say that
Okay.
our panel, that are the people here today may be all over the state.
Gotcha. Okay. So as far as statewide, there is a problem with jurisdictions. each jurisdiction may have a different non-emergency phone number. There's two different lines usually. There's non-emergency and 911. If it's a 911 situation, there's violence, you need police officers there now. If it's a non-emergency, if you're just having a really bad day and your kid is just being a pain and you need an officer there to maybe, and I was going to talk about some of the options to where we can take kids. I would recommend using a non-emergency, and those are numbers that you can Google for whatever city you live in. I know West Jordan has a different one than West Valley. Each city usually has their own non-emergency. Some of them actually have their own dispatch center in the city if it's like a smaller city. So it really depends. As far as if you want a non-law enforcement response, we have UNI, and UNI has a MCOT team. Now, MCOT is the Mobile Crisis Outreach Team, and they're usually, right now, they're running 3 teams, and they should be available 24 hours a day. And you can call them and request UNI to dispatch MCOT to your residence. That's not something a police officer has to do. That's something that anyone can do. Sometimes there's a little bit of a wait for that. So we see a lot of it, like we'll tell people, hey, you know what, call for an officer, then call MCOT. Officer can come out and sit and try and, you know, help out the situation. And then MCOT can come in, and MCOT's a really good resource as far as follow-up and, you know, additional care.
Okay, thank you. And CIT is Crisis Intervention Team. Is that what that is?
So it's crisis intervention training.
Training, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah. So,
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Let's move on. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So all of our officers, we are striving to get all of our officers at 40 hours. It is hard. We're trying our best to do that. The problem is we run into confliction in schedules. There is an overtime aspect to some of it because some of our officers still work patrol. And then it's a factor of like pulling them out of patrol to go to this training. So there's a lot of issues there. But what's nice about our program is we do have a third tier of our program, or sorry, second tier of our program, and that is what we've designated them as Romeo units on the road, but there are CIT certified units. They get 40 hours extra, and it's a voluntary program. We understand that some officers are not into mental health. They're not into mental health. They're not into help, you know, that kind of a situation. They want to chase bad guys. They want to chase stolen cars. So we're not going to force that on everybody. But we usually get some volunteers, and usually it's somebody who has interest in that kind of a field. And we'll take them and we'll train them for an extra 40 hours. And that's where we advise parents to call for those CIT officers, because all of our officers are going to get the basic 40 hours. But we find if we can get those volunteers who care more about this situation, they're more vested in the interest of the success of this program. They're more vested in the success of the child or the parent or just the adult who's having that crisis. So always call for them. And then of course we have our tier 3, which is my level, which is the detective level. So.
Okay.
Oh,
sorry. Go ahead. We do have another question, but if you keep going, we can do that one. We can do that one in a few minutes.
Okay, I'll just finish up with basically what I do on my level. So as a detective, I get all sorts of different cases. So I can get cases. I just recently got one for a mother of an autistic son. He is one of 5 that was adopted. So when patrol went out, they went out and they addressed the concerns that evening. They tried to get as much information as they could about the situation, but sometimes there's nothing that we can do. Unless there's a very thin line that we have to meet to be able to really do anything unless it's criminal. And even if it's criminal, as far as juveniles, we're not necessarily going to, take your child to jail. By all means, our goal is to avoid taking any child to jail. If we can resolve that situation on scene, then we're going to try and resolve it on scene. But sometimes there's just nothing that we can do. And at that point, what our patrol units are going to do, instead of being stuck there, for 12 or 13 hours or however long, what they will do is they will forward the case on to detectives. I am one of 3 detectives in this program, and then we have a social worker. And what we do is we'll go out, we'll meet with the family, we'll assess the needs, and then we'll get in touch with uni, we'll get in touch with disability groups. We're working with a family over in Kearns currently. Their son is autistic. He's 17. He's almost 300 pounds, and he's like 6'6". I mean, this kid is gigantic, but he smashes out windows in their home. He's actually ripped siding off the home. We're working with all sorts of advocate groups and stuff, and we've actually got him placed into a group home for a little bit. We've reassessed his medications, and currently he is doing really well, to the point where they're looking at bringing him back into the home. The family has gone from using plastic and duct tape over the windows just to keep out the weather to actually having windows in the home. And we see a lot of success with this kind of stuff. It does take a lot of work, but that is our goal in our tier 3, is to find those solutions. So that's like a basic outline of what our program is. And we also have a mental health court, but that's for adults, not for juveniles. So,
Which that does kind of lead into our next question. So if
perfect.
the child in question is actually an adult, are they approached differently by CIT, and what should parents do if there's a meltdown? What can parents do in that situation?
It gets a little bit more difficult. So state law mandates that if there is violence and it's domestic in nature, an officer must take action.
What
The
is
thing
that?
is,
What do you mean by action? Can you explain that a little bit more, please?
the officer has to make an arrest.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the state law, and it's written in the code. There's nothing we can do about it. The difference is, though, we do have discretion in what we do. And that's where our training comes into play. So understanding the fact that, yes, there is going to be adult children, especially with autism. Like we have one, like this child I was just speaking about, 17, he's almost an adult. Once he becomes an adult, he becomes subject to the state code as an adult. And something like busting out the windows during an argument or something like that, it does fall under the criminal mischief for DV, domestic violence. And the state code does mandate that an arrest has to be made by an officer.
Okay.
The nice thing is that we do have discretion a little bit. We do have to make an arrest, but where does that arrest have to take place? If it's a violent felony, if weapons are involved, if somebody has gotten hurt, we do have to act appropriately. But if it's an autistic kid who is smashing out windows because he's in a crisis, we have the officer discretion to provide a citation and a solution in maybe taking that child to an emergency room to get stabilized or something along those lines, where the child isn't necessarily going to be going to jail, because the jail is not a good place. Plain and simple, it's not a great place to go. There's a lot of bad people there. So we look for those solutions. And we do in West Valley have a mental health court. We're the only city in Salt Lake City that has a justice level mental health court. There is a district court in Salt Lake that has a mental health court, but we're the only city. And by justice, that's basically class Bs and lower. So that's like your criminal trespass, your simple assaults, everything like that. And our mental health court is a great program because we're focused on finding a solution and helping the family rather than punishing them. So it's a great program that we have.
Okay, wonderful. We did have another question.
Okay.
Do you have a list, or is there somewhere we can go online to get a list of CIT program phone numbers throughout the state?
CIT programs. So
Or like different
like uni?
fees. Well, it says program, so I think I worded that kind of incorrectly. So is there a list for the CIT for the different police departments throughout the state?
Gotcha.
Sorry.
You can go under CIT Metro, and it should have a list of all the participating police departments. There is another program in the state. It's called CIT Utah. They're more structured around certification of programs than they are program, like building a program basis. So they'll basically go into a police department and certify that police department's CIT program. So I wouldn't be able to tell you as far as those, but I do know if you go under CIT Metro, you'll see all the participating police departments. When we go and set up something in Iron County, we'll push for them to join with us, but it'll be up to them to see if they want to join our organization. The problem is we understand in CIT Metro that our CIT program won't fit necessarily down in Iron County. They don't have the same situation. They don't have the same resources that we do. So with CIT Metro, we try to build a program that fits that department.
Okay. So we've got a couple of questions here about individuals and guardianship.
Okay.
If an adult with special needs runs away, and the parents do not have guardianship, can law enforcement do anything like to bring them back?
Yes, okay. We can. So,
Great.
and this will boil down to what the disability is. So there's two different areas that we can do. We can do what's called a welfare check to see if we can locate that that adult. The other thing that we can do is a missing at risk. So that's where you have somebody, if this is an adult, say an adult autistic, or this is an adult with schizophrenia, and they're not on their medications. If there is a risk factor, even if it's an adult with severe diabetes and they don't have their medication, anything that is life-threatening in nature, you can call the police and report a missing at risk. It'll have to be out of the city that person was currently living in. So if that person's living in, say, West Valley, and mom and dad live in Sandy, they can't report it in Sandy. They'd have to contact West Valley to report that person as a missing at risk. And then articulation. That's the key to everything. Remember to articulate why that person is a missing at risk person and why, and what they can do at that point is officers will try and track them down as much as they can. And in the end, if we can't locate them, what we'll do is we'll list them nationwide on the NCIC database. So anytime somebody comes on, whenever somebody finds that person, if they run into them on the street and they ID them, what will happen is they'll be flagged in the national system, and that goes throughout every department. And it basically says, hey, this person's a missing at risk. It gives you the case number, department to call. It'll also give mom and dad's information so that mom and dad can retrieve that person. And more than likely what they'll do is if they find somebody who's missing at risk, they will immediately transport them to the hospital. And then mom and dad will get notifications, the originating police department will get notifications, and where that person currently is and their status and everything that we provide.
Wonderful. You've got 10 minutes left, and
okay.
Your questions are great. Oh, we have another one.
Real quick, let me just talk about what we can do if a child is removed from the home.
Perfect. Okay.
Because I don't want people to think that there are no resources and that we're not going to do anything other than take kids to, at least here in the Salt Lake County, and you can check with your local departments and find out what the resources are. But here in Salt Lake County, there's a couple of options. If we can determine that that child is a danger to themselves or others, and that can be suicidal, or if they attack somebody. We had a juvenile the other day who at 8 years old, he put a knife to his brother's throat. We can articulate that that's a danger to other people. What we tried to do is we tried to take that child to primary children's. If your insurance doesn't cover primary children's, let the police officer know, and he will work with you to get that child to whatever emergency room your insurance takes. If it's a case where that child is not necessarily a danger to themselves or to others, there are other options. There's other options such as JRC, which is the Juvenile Receiving Center. And that is basically it's a timeout center. So what we usually do is the child hasn't committed any crimes, but they are being a handful at home. We'll talk to the parents about JRC. And what we do is we take the child in, we admit them, and basically what we do is we provide mom and dad's information, if there's any like medications that they need to take, and then they basically give them a spot to just kind of relax. There's video games for them to play, there's other kids, they'll feed them. There's a lot of different things with JRC. Outside of the Salt Lake County, I'm sure that each county has their own kind of JRC. It's just a matter of looking at or talking to your police department about what that is. Detention center, that is an option, but again, that's more for violent felonies. The detention center is where we usually have, like, unfortunately, if a kid is involved in a shooting or something like that, where it's a violent felony where somebody may have lost their lives or something like that. But even if they end up at detention, it's not like jail in the sense that jail is jail. There's actually schooling, there's programs, there's counseling. The difference is instead of a bedroom, they do have like a little area where they stay. But it is an option. And then one of the other options that we also look at is whether or not there's available family. We find that a lot of the times, sometimes family is one of those hooks that can really calm down somebody. Maybe they have an attachment to an aunt, or maybe a cousin or something like that, and we can get a hold of that family and just breaking away, letting everybody calm down for an hour or so, and then bringing people back together. It's really effective, just giving everybody that moment to breathe. So that is some of that. Let me see here. Yeah, so those were the ones I did want to cover with you guys. So, but I do want everybody to know detention is not the first thing that we look at. And even if we do end up, one of the things I've done as a police officer is if we do have a juvenile that has committed a crime, if there is a crime that is committed, we do refer charges over to juvenile court. The nice thing about juvenile court, at least here in Utah, is it's not focused on punishment. Juvenile courts are focused on curbing bad behavior and getting the child back onto a correct course. So a lot of the time when we refer charges, especially for children with a learning disability or a mental disability or physical disability, anything that could be a disability, the courts look at more at like counseling. They look at more like therapy, those kind of things. And that is the first priority of the courts. And it's nice because not only do the courts look at that for the child, but they also look at that for parents. So we had a child the other day that we referred charges. The nice thing is when he goes to court, he is mandated that he has to go to counseling. One of the problems his mom was having was that she said that he wouldn't go to counseling because he just, every time she put him in the car, he refused to go to counseling. But once we have that court involved, the court mandates it. And we find that there's a little bit of fear of the court, even though, you know, the courts aren't really going to be terrible. And so the courts really work in the sense that if there are charges brought against the child, those charges are usually, the attempt is to correct bad behavior, not punishment. They don't immediately, like if we refer charges to the courts, they don't immediately just send the child to detention for 6 months and they never get out. They will go as much as they can with counseling, therapy, med management, everything that they can do to find a solution beyond separation of the child from family.
Fantastic. This is all such great information. I'm wondering if it's okay with you that we maybe extend the time a little more to even 8:25, 8:30, so we can have all of our questions answered. And if you
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
wonderful. So I'm going to kind of do things slightly differently. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to announce our winners for the random prizes. And so let's see, drum roll. Erin Flinders has won a $25 Costco card, and Melissa Walton has won a, drum roll please, jumbo giraffe stuffy, which I'm a little jealous because I love giraffes and stuffies. And in a few minutes, we are going to be launching the poll. So as we are talking with Detective Dean, when you see that poll pop up on the screen, please fill that out. And let's get back to some of our questions. Are you ready for some questions, or did you have a few more?
Absolutely. No,
Okay.
go right ahead.
Okay, let me go back.
Uh-oh. There we go. Sorry, my computer started to go to sleep, so I had to shake the mouse.
Okay. So this is going back to one of the discussion about if an adult with disabilities is being violent, then he or she gets arrested. But if they aren't being violent and they're not hurting anyone, and they're just upset, escalating, maybe even being threatening, do they need to be arrested, or can officers use some de-escalation techniques? What are some things? I think, us as parents are worried that, they're going to be arrested.
Absolutely.
It's not absolutely necessary.
Absolutely. And that's a legitimate concern. I have kids of my own, and I don't want anybody throwing my kid to the ground. I don't want anything like that happening to my kid. I can't guarantee the outcome. But I can tell you that we as police officers recognize that there is an issue. The hard thing for us is that Officers come to work each day and they put on several hats. 1 minute I can be a marriage counselor. 1 minute I am a therapist. 1 minute I am the police officer chasing after the bad guy. I can be a taxi service, all sorts of different things each time. I can't guarantee that you're not going to get that officer who has just had the worst day of their career and they're done for the day. I can't guarantee that. But I can tell you we know that that is a problem. And we recognize that. And that's why we push for CIT. It is a fabulous program. It gives officers tools, and that is our goal, is to have tools to be able to manage the situation. If we can use the hooks and recognize the triggers to avoid those, and we can de-escalate a situation, that is our goal. No officer, okay, most officers, probably 99% of us, none of us want to use force on anybody. Most of us got into this career. I've taught a lot of people. I've taught a lot of police officers at post. I've taught a lot of CIT academies. And if you ask any officer coming into this why they want to do this, the number one answer is, I want to help people. And we do. We want to help people. That is our goal. We want to be that shield against the bad. And so CIT gives us that opportunity. CIT gives us that chance to recognize that this may not be a time to go in and pepper spray people and tase people and, you know, time to put on the hard knuckle gloves. This is an opportunity for us to recognize that there is a problem and to work on a solution. That is our goal with CIT.
Okay, thank you. When should we as parents call CIT? When is it bad enough that we should call? And how do we balance the fear of having our adult child with special needs, having charges brought against them, potentially going to jail or being incarcerated, potentially becoming a victim because they're vulnerable? There's a lot of just fear and anxiety at the thought of that, where they're in a place where we can't protect them.
And that's a good question. And that's a hard one to answer. Each one of these situations is going to be a different situation. I can't speak for every situation, but it is going to boil down to when you feel like you need to call. What I would suggest is that contact your police department and find out if there is an active CIT program. If there is not an active CIT program, push for a CIT program. And you can, we tell people all the time, if they have any questions about CIT, you are more than welcome to reach out to us. I work with any city, I'll work with any parent that has questions. I have no problem working with people and trying to set that up. We're going to go down to Iron County and help set up their CIT program. So if your police department does not have a CIT program and they want information on how to set up a CIT program, we're more than welcome to give them everything that we have, and they can take what they want and use what they want. You can say, hey, you know what, West Valley has a fabulous program. Why don't you reach out to them and see? Or if you guys have concerns, you're more than welcome to reach out to us as well, because we're more than welcome, we're more than willing to help out where we can. That is our job. As far as if your city does have a CIT program, I would highly recommend calling and requesting CIT certified or CIT officers if there is a situation. You will know your child better than the police officer will. So what I would recommend is if you recognize those signs where that crisis is about to escalate into some sort of situation, if you recognize those signs, I would call before it gets to the point where it's out of control. And you know what? That's the best. We talk to people all the time, especially in domestic situations. Uh, we have no problem coming out and mediating a situation where it's just a verbal argument. Because if we can stop it there, where there is no criminal problem, that's the best outcome for us. We don't mind taking 30, 40 an hour to mediate a situation where it's just a mild situation, where we can maybe spearhead something before it gets to the point where there are charges that have to be brought. So I would recommend, if you have a CIT program, call for a CIT officer. If you don't, call as soon as you recognize those signs and articulate to the officer why you need an officer to mediate the program or the situation, and look for an opportunity to, if there's something that you know of that maybe, if they will, go over to this uncle or aunt's house, and if they're willing to take them, more than likely a police officer is willing to transport for you. So our goal is to not go to jail. So if there's a situation you feel like it's escalating, call immediately. That way we can spearhead it before it gets to any kind of charges.
Okay, fantastic. That is all of the questions, unless one pops up within the next minute or so. Great information. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic, and we really
Good.
appreciate you joining us tonight.
Good. And if you guys need anything, feel free to reach out to me. You have my email. If anybody needs any kind of help or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us. I don't want to brag. I don't want to brag, but our department probably has the best program in the state. So, and we would love to share, because if we could get everybody involved, I think we'd have a lot better situation. So.
And can we just, we may have posted it in the chat somewhere. Can you just give us your contact information one more time, just for those parents?
Absolutely.
First time.
So it's Jeremy.Dean, and so JEREMY.DEAN at WVC-UT.gov. And that's my email. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. I will try to respond, but if I don't immediately, please don't hate me. I just have a lot on my plate. I also run threat assessments, and right now, it is what it is. I don't want to get into politics, but I do all the threat assessments. So we'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you so much. We very much appreciate the information you've given us tonight.
Thank you, guys.